Not everybody, even if you're cordial and nice in the workplace, not everybody is always looking out for your best interests. They're looking out for ways that they can utilize you in their advancement. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing, but just something to keep your eyes open and not necessarily be naive.
Welcome to Mission of Missions. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers. This is the show designed to help you grow, both professionally and personally, in the fast-paced world of higher education. Every other Tuesday, I sit down with senior leaders, new professionals, and difference makers from across higher ed and beyond, where we'll share tips and strategies related to challenging topics like student recruitment, leadership, customer service, enrollment marketing, and time management. So if you're looking for practical advice and conversations that actually move the needle, this show's for you. Grab your notepad or fire up your notes app, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 94 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Career advancement in any industry, including higher ed, is rarely accidental. It's usually the result of many intentional choices and decisions that we make along the way and relationships that we cultivate. Joining me today to talk about what it takes to stand out in the workplace and how to confidently step into new opportunities is Andréa Castro from Lafayette College. Andréa, thanks for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
I get asked this question, so I wanted to ask it to you to start us off. What's the best career advice you've ever received over the course of your entire higher ed career?
So I think the best piece of career advice I've received so far, thankfully, came early on in my career from the director of my master's program that I was pursuing at the time. I grew very close with him over the course of the 2 years roughly that I was pursuing that degree. And my degree is in leadership and public administration. So a lot of kind of this type of what do leaders look for? How do you grow in your career? And one thing that he told me was, not everybody, even if you're cordial and nice in the workplace, not everybody is always looking out for your best interests. They're looking out for ways that they can utilize you in their advancement. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing, but just something to keep your eyes open and not necessarily be naive. And I think in our field in particular, we cover the nation, but it's a very small industry. Lots of people know each other. Everybody knows somebody else higher than you or knows somebody who's going to be coming into your office. And so I think it's really important to think about the relationships that you are building with people, how you are utilizing them, how are they utilizing you, and doing that in a way that is professional, respectful, and also trying not to take things personally and knowing that we're all trying to do things that are best for our career path.
But yeah, one thing I've learned over 12 years in the industry without question is, there's a lot of common threads between a lot of people. And so just being intentional, as you said, about saying, I have to advocate for myself and I have to be intentional about building relationships, right? And not expecting people to come to me. So you started at Centenary. I would be curious to know, how did you know, or when did you first think, you know what, I think I want more, or I think I'm ready for more? Talk us through kind of how that process went for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I ever really had that kind of light bulb moment of this is what I want to do with my life. This is my career. Everybody in admissions makes the same joke. We didn't intend to be here. We didn't major in admissions coming into this work. So I think, I didn't necessarily have that light bulb moment. I have always been somebody who wants more. I'm an oldest daughter. I'm a Capricorn, for whatever that's worth to people. And so I think, I've always had that ambition in me and that strive to want to better myself. And I think that regardless of whether you see admissions as your career, if you're kind of starting in, or if you just see it at that time in your life as a job, that is still a part of your life and something, to your point, that goes on your LinkedIn and your resume, that is going to represent you at that point in time. And so, why wouldn't you want to be the best version of yourself, be the best employee that you can be, do the work? And if you decide to move on from that, at least you have somebody who's going to be a great reference for you. And worst case, if that is your career, you are already taking steps to improve and advance.
And so when those moves came for you, right, early in your career, again, if you're comfortable sharing, walk us through just was it a combination of you advocating for, hey, I'm looking for more, and leadership saying, we think you're ready for more? Was it just you advocating? Was it leadership coming to you? Like, walk us through again how it played out for you to get to where you are now, which is obviously at a different institution, in a much more of a middle management position.
Yeah, I think it truly was a mix of all of the above. I think that your career is always a team effort. Most of the work is coming from you, but you need to have the right people in your corner and the right people to advocate for you. So, my first advancement, my first step up in my career came just about 1 year into my work in admissions. I was presented with the opportunity to interview internally for a transfer admission counselor position. And the fact that my supervisors at the time came to me and said, "We think that you would be a good fit for this position. We would love for you to interview." That in itself was enough to give me confidence to go out for the role, even though I was still kind of, getting my feet underneath me and really understanding the admissions cycle. I think that belief from supervisors was a lot to propel me forward. And that's something that I've carried with me since college as well. I was super shy in college, didn't want to try anything new, but my professors that I respected and that I trusted believed that I could do things. And so I just decided to go for it.
When you talk about people believing, in you there, and I appreciate that, what do you think some of the things were that you did if you think back on, again, those conversations with those leaders, Andrea, that like made them want to advocate for you and say, yep, she's ready for this next journey, this next part of her professional career?
Yeah, I think a lot of communication. That is something that I have grown really comfortable with over time in my career, and so it's not always easy, but I remember taking on a task in my very first year and getting so nervous that I was going to mess something up or miss something, let something fall through the cracks, and I went to one of my supervisors and said, "I don't know if this is the right task for me. These are the things that I'm nervous about." And she kinda talked me off the ledge, and she said, "I wouldn't have given this to you if I didn't think you could handle it." But I think having that vulnerability builds trust with a leader because they're not just gonna think, "Oh, I'm gonna give them something and they might mess it up," or, they might not take it seriously. That showed that I valued the quality of my work, that I valued the outcome for the college, the institution that I worked for. So I think that communication and that honesty from me was really important. And I also have always been curious. I always am asking questions. I'm always in my position now at Lafayette. I'm popping into the dean's office and saying, "Hey, you mentioned this in the staff meeting. Can we talk more about that? I want to learn more." And I think that is always something that's valued because that shows, again, my investment and my wanting to learn more about our industry, not just my specific tasks that I've been assigned.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more about curiosity. People ask me all the time again, give me a skill, Jeremy, that's probably something that everybody like needs to be good at, but is kind of underrated and people maybe don't talk about or think about. And I'm like, we all need to be more curious, right?
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that. And it does make me wonder though, you talked about when you were younger, right? You were quote unquote a shy, introverted, teenager. And now you're talking about, hey, I really advocate for myself and I'm vulnerable with like leadership. How did that happen, Andrea? Meaning, like, if somebody listening to this is like, "Yep, I'm not, a chatty Cathy, and I just don't have, an easy time going and talking with, I'll say senior leaders, not just in my office, but on other offices on campus." How do you start to lean into vulnerability more? Like, what advice would you give to somebody who's like, "No, it makes sense. I know I need to do it, but like, how do I do it?"
Vulnerability in any aspect, not just your career, is scary for a reason. There is nothing about it that makes it not scary for people because it is the unknown. It is setting yourself up for potential for criticism and for failing. And I think at some point, again, it was the belief that other people had in me that allowed me to say, I'm really nervous to take this opportunity, but my professor that I have had multiple classes with, that has advised me, that really has gotten to know me over the semester or two that I was in college, believes that I can do this. And so that means that they must have seen something in me. And again, this is something that happened to me when I was in college, but something that I really, at some point, I was not happy with the fact that all of the friends that I had made up to that point were because of my roommate or because of the person I sat next to in class. And I wanted to leave my own mark and start making my own path in the world.
This episode is brought to you by Bolt, the AI agent engine for higher education built by Element 451. Here's the thing about higher ed right now. Your team doesn't have a software problem, they have a bandwidth problem. Prospects go unanswered, students don't get the support they need, and your best people are burning out trying to close the gap manually. Bolt fixes that. It deploys specialized AI agents into the systems you already run, whether that's Element 451, Salesforce, Slate, or anything else, to actually do the work that's been falling through the cracks. Answering student questions, evaluating applications, surfacing risk signals, engaging prospects, around the clock, nights, weekends, spring break included. It's not a chatbot bolted onto your CRM. It's not another generic AI layer. It's purpose-built for the higher ed student lifecycle with SKUs for admissions, marketing, and student success. If you've been wondering how AI actually shows up and does the work instead of just answering questions about it, that's Bolt. Learn more at element451.com. How then can somebody, if they're like, all right, my boss doesn't typically come to me and like ask me about my career goals, and I don't really know how to start that conversation, but like the vibe I'm getting is that I'm ready and people are giving that belief in me and I feel like I'm ready. How should somebody approach a conversation then about career goals and advancement with their supervisor, Andrea, that I'll say makes it a positive interaction and just not like a really awkward conversation then moving forward with that person?
Yeah. I think talking about your career advancement, asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, those things are inherently always going to be awkward. I think that is just the culture of those conversations in the US. And I think the first step is to just embrace that there's probably going to be something awkward, either because you're naming a number or because maybe you're saying, I think I'm ready for this. And your supervisor is saying, well, I think actually you need to work more on this. Those things are always going to be awkward. So I think step one is to embrace that awkwardness. I also think that it is incredibly, incredibly important. And this applies to our job working with students as well. You can't just talk about the big things with those people. I think it's really important to establish some kind of rapport, to go and talk to, hey, how was your day? How was your weekend? How are your kids? Because you genuinely care. These are people that you see every day. Sometimes you see them more than your family, but also because that makes the quote unquote bigger conversations more digestible because that foundation of communication, of openness is already there. And then hopefully that would allow you to be more comfortable to say, hey, how was your weekend? I was wondering if you have the chance for me to throw a 20-minute meeting on your calendar. Just want to talk about some of my responsibilities in the office. I think that segue becomes so much easier if you've already put in the work to build that rapport.
And I love how you tied that in with recruitment of students and families, right? Because you're spot on. It's the exact same thing to go in. And this is for all of you listening, why I'm always encouraging people. Like your first ask shouldn't be to sign up for a campus visit or start the application. Those are big asks. Doesn't mean a student will never do them, but a lot of students, to Andrea's point, need to have some trust and rapport built with you or somebody at your institution before they're going to feel comfortable, right, to take a big next step. And it's the same thing when you think about your career advancement. So I really appreciate that advice. If you're comfortable sharing, have you ever been passed over for a role, Andrea, or just something where you were like, I think that's an opportunity I want, and then for whatever reason, it just didn't work out? And if that's the case, What did that teach you that probably has benefited you in the long run?
The first thing that popped into my head was when I was an orientation leader in college. So a lot of my foundations, I think, go back to college and my foundations in this work. I was an orientation leader, typical orientation leader, tour guide, pipeline to admissions counselor, very typical. And I did my first summer as an orientation leader going into my junior year. And then I applied to be a second year orientation leader, and I ended up not being selected. And I was very disappointed. I felt like I had grown a lot the summer previously. I felt like I had really started to put myself forward and to grow as a leader and just become more outgoing. And I felt disappointed because either A, I hadn't grown as much as I had thought, or B, the people in charge weren't seeing it in the same way that I was. So that idea of this kind of internal perception versus what are other people seeing in the way that I'm presenting myself, I think that that was the first moment that I was like, where's the disconnect happening? But I think the lesson that I took from that was really important is just learning to let go. A lot of these things, again, are not personal. They're not specifically saying, we don't like Andrea, we're not going to select her as an orientation leader, or she received bad feedback. I knew that I had, a lot of my students that I worked with that summer had shown me the feedback that they were giving me. So I knew that, it wasn't something personal. Maybe there were better candidates. There's always, I think the important mentality to have is there's always going to be somebody better. How do you strive to try to beat the best person in the room when it's not you? And I think, yeah, that experience just taught me how to let go of that disappointment, move forward, reflect on where I can continue to improve, and just keep that in mind for future opportunities.
One, I love the way you package that together at the end because I think that's exactly what you have to do. Those of you listening, you have to let go, like Andrea said, but then you have to be willing to say, all right, let me reflect a little bit as to like what I can take from this and maybe where I need to think about something differently or do something differently. And I find, Andrea, as I talk with a lot of people from senior leaders down to entry level staff, they'll try to let go. But I think part of the reason they can't let go, right, is they haven't really like processed everything and thought about like, well, what is it that potentially may be not ready for it or made that other person a better candidate? So, what's one skill you think then? We talked about curiosity earlier. I'm just curious. What's another skill then that you think people probably underestimate when it comes to, I'll say, career advancement, but has either been helpful for you or as you talk with people in the industry, you're like, yep, this is something I see a lot of.
Yeah, I think something that is underestimated when thinking about trying to move forward in your career is just putting your head down and working. I think a lot of people, we talk about having these conversations, and I think that self advocacy is important. I think having those conversations is important. But ultimately, what a supervisor is going to be looking for is the proof. You can have these conversations all you want about, I think I'm ready for this. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to lead this team. I'm ready to step into this role. But if they're not seeing that in practice, the words mean nothing if you don't have that evidence to back it up. And so I think just work, just work. Don't worry about impressing, and opportunities will come. I've seen that in my career at Lafayette so far. It was, I think, my second cycle at Lafayette, but my first cycle with our new dean. And I went to a school. I did my high school visit. I did my little session. And at the end of the day, I had come back home and I received an email from the dean. And it was an email that just said, "Great job." And I looked at the attached email, and it was from the school counselor at that school saying, "Andrea did a wonderful job. She presented really well. She connected with the students. She was on their level, but also seemed like she's been a 30-year professional," which I certainly have not still. And I wasn't trying to impress. I was just trying to do the best that I could in my role. And that trickled up to one of my supervisors. So just putting in the work, that recognition will come naturally.
So you moved to Lafayette, and in the last year, you become the senior assistant director there. Can you think of a time or a moment before you got promoted last year to that role when you think that, again, this was a really good demonstration of something you did to show others there at Lafayette, including maybe your boss who you just referenced, that like, I'm ready for this next level in my career?
Yeah. I, again, in preparation for this, actually look back at my performance evaluation just before I received this promotion, and I took on a lot in the year before I was promoted. I became the host coordinator for two of our overnight programs. So, coordinating student hosts for prospective students and working with our student interns for the program. I took on being the liaison between admissions and our arts department at Lafayette and a couple other things. And those were roles that I asked for. I put myself forward. The role of arts liaison was open. I said, I've studied arts in college. That's probably going to be fun. Let me go back to some of those roots, and decided to raise my hand for that. But when it came time for our overnight programs, that position wasn't necessarily up for grabs, but in our planning meetings, I said, I would love the opportunity to connect more with current students. I think that'll be great for them to have another trusted person that they can come to. I think it'd be great for me to get a closer connection to the student perspective at Lafayette. And so I just asked, can I take over this role? And I think that showed initiative, that showed me caring about really understanding the values of the college. And again, that student perspective. I think me raising my hand for those positions and filling a need in some cases is something that probably stood out and helped with my performance evaluation and then with my subsequent promotion.
Where do you think your internal drive comes from?
We're getting deep. How much time do you have? Um, I am the oldest child in a Hispanic household. So shout out to all my eldest daughters who are listening. There's always that want to do good, to not necessarily make waves. You want to just kind of nose to the grindstone, keep going. I was a super bookworm in school, always worried about my progress reports and report cards. And so that drive just came from knowing what my expectations were from my family and wanting to meet them, right? Again, not wanting to cause waves, not wanting to disappoint people. And, not that my parents were super strict or demanding or anything like that, but, it did create that drive in me as an adult to say, they did all those things. They put that pressure on me because they wanted me to do better than they did, and to continue that. And now as an adult, I'm getting ready to get married. I'm getting ready to really start my life as a real adult, supposedly. And I want to keep this drive and instill that in my future family and make sure that they continue to also have better than I did.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's been interesting over the years. I've asked, a similar question like that to guests. And it really seems to come back to our formative years, right? When we're younger and we're growing up. And, I tell anybody who's a new parent this all the time, right? I have a daughter. We have a daughter here, my wife, Jenny, and I, who is now 17 and a high school junior. They're paying attention, much like leadership's paying attention to you when you're in there, even when you don't think they're paying attention. And by they, I mean your kids, right? If you happen to be a parent. And so, watching and being mindful of the things you do, knowing that they're picking up on things. But leaders, I would tell you the same thing. Like, teams take on the identity of their leader. And so if you're a leader that promotes things that Andrea has talked about today, your staff's probably going to be more vulnerable, probably going to be more intentional, probably going to be, more interested in building relationships and not just being transactional. And so since you've been promoted to your current role, Andrea, of senior assistant director there, what surprised you about the position?
Yeah, I think what's important to realize is that sometimes you have to do the work of the promoted role before actually receiving that promotion. You're doing a lot of the work beforehand. And so I feel like my promotion didn't necessarily come with additional roles and responsibilities. What surprised me, I suppose, was the increased expectations and just having this role of now I am a senior in the office. There are still people above me, but this perception of, for any new counselors joining our office, oh, Andrea is a senior assistant director. She knows if I have a question, I'm going to go to her. If I'm confused, I'm going to go to her. Um, so just that change in expectations and perception of my place in the office, I think was the unexpected surprise of my new role.
So if somebody listening today is like, what's step one then, Andrea, in terms of what I should do first? If I'm not at your level, but I absolutely feel like number one, I'm ready or pretty close to being ready for that type of a role. I feel like I'm kind of doing already some of the work of that role, like you just said. And I want to go and I want to advocate for myself. What's the first, I'll say, step, or how should somebody think about, I'll say, the process of like starting to try to understand if the opportunity exists and like where they might fit in that equation with their leadership group?
Yeah, I think the first important thing to think about and to research is, what does promotion look like at your institution? What is the process? There are some schools where they internally promote, but you have to maybe interview for that new role. That was my first move up in my career in admissions. Is it based on your performance evaluation through HR? Understanding that process will help you understand what are your next steps. So I think that is definitely step one. I think step two is, again, trying to build that rapport with the people who are going to make those decisions. Having that trust, that communication is so important to then later on down the line be able to have those more difficult conversations, to pull up a chair and say, I've been doing XYZ roles. I'm doing the same or similar to this person who maybe is in a role above me. How can I continue to show that preparation, and how can we begin to move forward in this process? So I think that would be kind of step two. Overall, documenting is important as well. Document the teams that you're going to. If you do performance evaluations, keep your performance evaluations. I just looked at mine again yesterday, just to see like, wow, okay, I was taking on a lot. Find somebody that you trust in your office or in the industry, right? The Pennsylvania ACAC has been super helpful for me in having a lot of different people at different institutions. So I can say your unbiased opinion, right? You're not in our institution. You work at a totally different institution than mine. What are your thoughts on these things? And it can be larger level all the way down to, how do you think I should respond to this email? So having those contexts is really helpful, but documenting, what am I doing? What are my roles? How have I improved? What are the contributions that I've made? I think that is all really important, so that if somebody says, well, I just don't know if maybe you possess this skill quite yet, here are the receipts, so to speak, of where I showed that I demonstrate those skills. So I think documenting, keeping those conversations open, and understanding that process in your institution are critical.
Andrea, the last thing I do on every episode of my podcast is something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a handful of questions and I want to get some quick answers from you on each. Okay.
Sure.
All right. You're originally from Bayonne, New Jersey. Which is the better restaurant, Hendrickson's Corner, Cafe Bello, or Broadway Diner?
Oh, I haven't lived in Bayonne since I couldn't even tell you, but I feel like probably Broadway Diner. Jersey, love a good diner.
You're a graduate of Ramapo College, which is in the foothills of the Ramapo Mountains of New Jersey. What do you like more, hiking or skiing?
Hiking, 100%, no question.
What's your go-to order at Starbucks?
A grande black iced tea with lemonade or a grande black iced tea with peach juice. Not a coffee girl.
What emoji do you use the most?
Probably the crying laughing or the crying with tears swelling down the face. There's no in between.
I love
Both
it.
very universal.
Correct. How would your parents describe what you do, Andrea?
I don't know if they fully know what I do, to be honest. It kind of is that reciprocal when you're a kid, you don't really know what your parents do. And I think then when you become a full-time employee, same thing. Like my dad thought I would have off in the summers in my job. I'm like, no, they just say, I think they just say admissions director or something like that, probably.
Well, I appreciate you being so comfortable sharing and being a little vulnerable today with some of this dialogue. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I look forward to the next time we connect. So thanks for your time today, Andréa.
Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to Mission Admissions. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.